The sound of the suitcase wheels stopped abruptly at the doorway. I looked up from my chair slowly, my hand still resting on the cup of tea that had long gone cold. The house felt different that evening, heavier, quieter, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. My daughter-in-law, Rachel, stood near the door. 2 suitcases. Packed. Zipped. Final. She didn't look at me at first. Her eyes stayed fixed on the floor, jaw tight, shoulders squared like she was preparing for a battle she had already lost. That was when I asked the question. Not loudly, not angrily, just calmly. "Did you ask the owner of the house for permission?" The words hung in the air. Rachel's head snapped up. Behind her, my son Daniel froze, and in that moment I knew whatever was about to happen would change this family forever. This was my house. People often forget that houses have histories. This one had seen birthdays, funerals, whispered prayers, and nights when I sat alone after my husband died, wondering how I would keep everything together. I had bought this house 34 years ago with my late husband. Every wall had been painted with effort, every floorboard replaced with savings earned through sacrifice. And now, a woman who had lived here for only 3 years stood ready to walk out without a word to me. The suitcases didn't appear suddenly. Rachel hadn't packed overnight. Suitcases like that come from weeks of silent resentment, late-night texting, and conversations held behind closed doors. I had felt it. The coldness at dinner, the way she avoided eye contact, the way Daniel suddenly worked late more often. Still, I never imagined she would leave like this, without respect, without conversation, without acknowledging whose roof she stood under. Daniel's silence. "Mom," Daniel finally said, rubbing his temples, "this isn't the time." I looked at my son, the boy I raised to say please and thank you, the man who now couldn't even look me in the eyes. "Then when is the time?" I asked quietly. Rachel scoffed. "I don't need permission to leave," she snapped. "I'm not a prisoner." I nodded slowly. "No," I said, "you're not." Then I leaned forward slightly. "But this is my house." Silence. Not even the clock dared to tick loudly. The hidden disrespect. Rachel crossed her arms. "I've lived here for years." "Yes, as family, not as owner." Her lips tightened. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. I continued, my voice steady. "You didn't pay the mortgage. You didn't cover the property taxes. You didn't sit at this table wondering how to keep the lights on after your father-in-law passed." Rachel's face flushed. "That doesn't matter," she said sharply. "Daniel is my husband, and I am his mother, and this house is still mine." The real issue. The suitcases weren't about leaving. They were about power, about walking out dramatically, expecting apologies, panic, and pleading. Rachel expected me to stay silent. She expected me to shrink. She expected me to beg my son to stay. Instead, she got a question, a simple one. "Did you ask the owner of the house for permission?" A mother's awakening. I realized how much I had tolerated, the passive disrespect, the subtle control, the way Rachel spoke to Daniel, sharp, dismissive, impatient. I had stayed quiet for the sake of peace, but peace built on silence always collapses, and tonight it finally did. Rachel's response. "I don't need your permission," she repeated, louder this time. I stood. My knees ached, but my voice didn't shake. "You don't," I agreed, "but you do need respect." She laughed bitterly. "Respect goes both ways." "Yes," I said, "and tonight you forgot yours." The house remembers. This house had seen strong women before me, my mother-in-law, my own mother, women who knew the difference between independence and entitlement. And as Rachel stood there with her suitcases, I knew this wasn't just about her leaving. It was about boundaries long overdue. Rachel's fingers tightened around the suitcase handle. For a moment, I thought she might let go, that she might finally sit down, breathe, and talk like family. But instead, she pulled the suitcase closer to her leg, as if holding onto it gave her strength. "This isn't about your house," she said coldly. "It's about me leaving a situation that's no longer healthy." I looked at Daniel, slowly, carefully. "Is that true?" I asked him. He didn't answer. That silence told me everything. The son I barely recognized. Daniel used to be the kind of boy who couldn't lie without his ears turning red. As a child, guilt followed him like a shadow. Now, as a grown man, he stood between his wife and his mother, saying nothing. That hurt more than Rachel's disrespect ever could. "Daniel," I said again, softer this time, "if there's something I need to know, say it." He swallowed. "Mom, Rachel isn't just leaving for the night." My heart tightened. "She's going to her parents' house," he continued, "indefinitely." Rachel nodded. "Until things change." I almost smiled. Things always need to change when someone wants control. The conversation that happened without me. I gestured toward the living room. "Sit," I said. "Both of you." Rachel hesitated. "I don't have to." "You do," I interrupted, not raising my voice. "If you're leaving my home, you will leave with clarity, not drama." Daniel gently touched her arm. "Let's just sit." Reluctantly, she did. The truth begins to surface. Rachel crossed her legs tightly. "I felt uncomfortable here for a long time." I nodded. "Because of me?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. Finally, she said, "Because you're always watching." I almost laughed. Watching? I was a widow in her own home, not a prison guard. "Watching how?" I asked. "You comment on things," Rachel said. "How I cook, how I clean, how I talk to Daniel." Daniel flinched. I leaned back slowly. "Rachel," I said calmly, "do you know why I comment?" She rolled her eyes. "Because you think you know better." "No," I replied, "because I raised the man you married." Daniel finally spoke. "That's exactly the problem," he suddenly blurted out. Both Rachel and I turned to him. "I feel stuck between you two," he said, voice cracking. "Rachel feels judged, you feel disrespected, and I'm exhausted." Exhausted? By what? Living rent-free? Having meals cooked? Never worrying about bills? I didn't say that. Instead, I asked one question. "Daniel," I said, "whose idea was it for Rachel to leave tonight?" Rachel answered before he could. "Mine." Daniel looked down. "The hidden plan." "Did you plan this?" I asked her. She hesitated, just a fraction, then said, "I planned to leave if nothing changed." I nodded. "And what was supposed to change?" I asked. She sighed dramatically. "Boundaries." I smiled slightly. "Boundaries go both ways," I said. Her eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said slowly, "you don't get to treat my house like a hotel when it suits you and a prison when it doesn't." The suitcases were a test. I saw it clearly now. The suitcases weren't packed out of desperation. They were packed as leverage. Rachel expected panic. She expected Daniel to beg. She expected me to feel guilty. Instead, she got calm. And calm is terrifying to people who want control. Rachel's parents enter the picture. "My parents think this arrangement is unhealthy," Rachel said suddenly. Ah, there it was. External influence always arrives quietly, then explodes. "And what do your parents think is unhealthy?" "That Daniel lives with his mother." I smiled politely. "And did they also tell you that Daniel and I agreed on this after his father passed?" She didn't respond. Daniel finally spoke. "They think I should be the man of the house." I raised an eyebrow. "And are you?" I asked gently. He opened his mouth, then closed it. A mother's realization. I realized something painful in that moment. Rachel wasn't the real problem. My son's passivity was. He had allowed resentment to grow instead of addressing it. He had allowed his wife to see me as an obstacle rather than family, and now he was watching the consequences unfold. The line is drawn. "Rachel," I said quietly, standing again, "you're free to leave." She looked surprised. "I won't stop you," I continued, "but when you walk out with those suitcases, understand this." She straightened. "You are choosing distance." Her eyes flickered. "And distance changes relationships permanently." Daniel looked panicked. "Mom!" I raised a hand. "I won't beg, I won't chase, and I won't be disrespected in my own home." The house falls silent again. Rachel stood slowly. She picked up the suitcases, but this time her movements weren't confident. They were uncertain. She glanced at Daniel. "Are you coming?" she asked. Every muscle in his body tightened. The question wasn't just about tonight, it was about loyalty. Daniel stood between us like a man caught in the middle of a burning bridge. Rachel waited by the door, suitcases upright, keys already in her hand. Her posture said she was ready to leave, but her eyes kept flicking back to Daniel, searching his face, measuring him. This wasn't just about going to her parents' house. This was a test, and everyone in the room knew it. "Are you coming?" Rachel asked again, sharper this time. Daniel looked at her, then at me. His mouth opened, but no words came out. I didn't speak. I didn't interrupt. I didn't rescue him. For the first time in his life, my son had to answer without a safety net. Minutes passed. The house was so quiet, I could hear the refrigerator hum. Finally, Daniel said, "Rachel, I think we need to talk first." Her face hardened instantly. "There's nothing to talk about," she snapped. "You're either with me or you're not." I watched my son flinch. Ultimatums do that. They don't invite love, they demand surrender. The moment I stepped back. "Daniel," I said calmly, "this is your marriage. I won't interfere." Rachel smirked, as if she'd won something. "But," I continued, "I will not be blamed for choices you make." Her smile vanished. Daniel turned to me. "Mom, if I go with her, are you going to hate me?" That question cut deeper than anything else that night. "No," I said softly, "but I will see you clearly." He swallowed. Rachel's mask slips. "So this is how it is," Rachel said bitterly. "You choose your mother over your wife?" I finally looked at her fully. "No," I said. "He's being asked to choose between pressure and responsibility." She scoffed. "That's rich coming from you." "Is it?" I asked quietly. She looked startled. "You moved into my house knowing the arrangement. You accepted support, stability, and security. But now that it no longer serves your image, you call it unhealthy." Daniel looked at her sharply. "Is that true?" he asked. Rachel hesitated. That hesitation spoke volumes. The real reason comes out. "I didn't sign up to live like this forever," she snapped. "People ask questions. My friends think it's strange. My parents think it's embarrassing." There it was. Not discomfort, not boundaries, embarrassment. Daniel's face fell. "So this is about how it looks?" he asked. Rachel threw her hands up. "I want a real life, a house of our own, independence." "And did you tell me that honestly?" She didn't answer. I watched my son realize something painful. This wasn't about leaving the house. It was about escaping accountability. Daniel makes his choice. Daniel took a deep breath. "I'm not coming tonight," he said quietly. Rachel froze. "What?" she whispered. "I'm not choosing against you, but I'm not being pushed either. If you're leaving to punish me, then go." Her eyes filled with disbelief. "You'll regret this," she said. "Maybe," he replied, "but I'd regret giving up my backbone more." For the first time in my son's life, I saw him stand upright. The exit. Rachel laughed bitterly. "This isn't over," she said, grabbing the suitcases. She opened the door, then paused. "You'll realize how controlling this is," she said, pointing at me. "And when you do, don't come looking for me." Then she left. The door closed with a sound that echoed through the house. Not a slam, a finality. After the door closed, Daniel sank onto the couch, hands covering his face. "I didn't plan for this," he said quietly. "I know," I replied. He looked up at me, eyes red. "Did I do the right thing?" I sat beside him. "You did the honest thing. The right thing reveals itself later." He nodded slowly. "I didn't realize how much I let her speak for me," he admitted. "That awareness hurt, but it also healed. A mother's truth." I stood. "This house isn't a weapon," I said gently. "It's a shelter. But no shelter works if people bring resentment instead of gratitude." He looked at me. "I should have spoken up sooner," he said. "Yes," I agreed, "but you're speaking now." The calm after the storm. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. Neither did I. But something had changed. The tension was gone. The power struggle was over. And for the first time in a long while, the house felt like itself again. Not because someone left, but because the truth finally stayed. 3 days passed. No calls, no messages, no dramatic social media posts. Just silence. The kind of silence that forces people to sit with their choices. Daniel moved through the house quietly, like someone learning a space again. He cooked for himself, cleaned up without being asked, sat at the table in the evenings, staring at nothing. On the 4th morning, the doorbell rang. I knew who it was before I stood up. Rachel returns. She stood on the porch alone. No suitcases this time. Her posture was different, less rigid, less rehearsed. She looked tired, not angry, not defiant, just tired. Daniel appeared behind me, his shoulders stiffened. "I'll handle it," he said quietly. I nodded and stepped back. This was no longer my confrontation to lead. The conversation on the porch. Rachel didn't step inside. "I didn't come to fight," she said quickly. Daniel crossed his arms. "Then why did you come?" She hesitated. "I needed space, time to think." "And?" he asked. She sighed. "I realized something." He waited. "I was angry," she admitted, "but I was also embarrassed. I let other people's opinions make me resentful." Daniel didn't respond right away. "I didn't want to feel like a guest forever," she continued, "but I handled it the wrong way." He nodded slowly. "Yes," he said, "you did." The condition. Rachel looked past him, toward the house. "I want to come back," she said, "but things have to change." Daniel straightened. "Go on." She took a breath. "I need us to make a plan, a real one. Independence, a timeline." He considered her words. Then he said something that surprised us both. "I agree." Her eyes widened slightly. "But," he continued, "not at the cost of respect." She nodded quickly. "I understand." "And," he added, "you don't get to use leaving as leverage again." Her face fell, but she nodded. "Okay." My turn to speak. I stepped forward then. Rachel turned toward me, clearly bracing herself. "I want to be clear," I said calmly. "You are welcome here as family, not as an opponent." She swallowed. "But this house," I continued, "is not a battlefield, and it will never be used for silent wars." She nodded again, quieter this time. "I should have spoken to you instead of packing." "Yes," I replied, "you should have." The real lesson. I looked at both of them. A home isn't owned by paperwork alone. It's owned by responsibility, gratitude, and honesty. Daniel listened carefully. You don't gain independence by burning bridges. You gain it by building stability. Rachel's eyes filled slightly. I didn't see it that way, she admitted. Now you do, I said gently. What changed? Rachel moved back in that evening, but something was different. She asked instead of assumed, spoke instead of sulked, participated instead of resisted. And Daniel? He stopped being silent. He spoke when something bothered him. He took responsibility for his marriage. He stopped expecting others to absorb his discomfort. We created a plan. 6 months, savings, a move-out timeline. No threats, no manipulation, just clarity. The final truth. One night, weeks later, Daniel said something that stayed with me. I finally understand what you meant, he said. About what? I asked. About asking permission isn't about control, it's about respect. I smiled. Yes, I said, and respect is the foundation of every home, no matter who owns it. Epilogue. The question that changed everything. Rachel and Daniel moved out 8 months later, on good terms, with gratitude. And before they left, Rachel stood in the doorway again. No suitcases this time. She looked at me and smiled. Thank you for asking that question. I nodded. Sometimes one calm sentence is stronger than 1,000 arguments. And sometimes the simplest question, did you ask the owner of the house for permission, doesn't challenge authority. It reveals character.